Hello. I want to share with you a recap of what happened at our first Leadership Pipeline meeting, or the Pipeline Workshop. You may or may not have been able to be there, but what I want to do is just try to capture in pretty quick fashion some of the highlights, because an important thing about the Pipeline meetings is that it's for us to get a shared vocabulary and kind of build a foundation together on what's important for us, what the language that we use around Redeemer. So it was a fun time. We had about 30 people there. I'd love to see that number doubled for the next one. But we got together in the fellowship hall, and the first thing I had us do was we had some time of worship and prayer, kind of set the tone, and then we talked about with each other what we did over the summer. Then I shared what I did in the summer and my sabbatical, and I call that Ministry Reimagined. I gave everybody, and you can have this, it'll be a link near this video that you can click on and get those 19 things. I know it's a big list. We didn't try to go through them all, but I pointed to a few of them at the meeting because these things come up in our conversations, and it's nice to be able to put a handle on it. And so that was an excerpt taken from my recent newsletter article. And they're just things that I really felt God has been working in me. I shared with everybody that I felt like during my sabbatical, God was kind of messing with me. And He really began to show me during this time that I was away from the body how much I missed being around the people of God. I mean, we went to a bunch of different churches, but we weren't with our family. We weren't connected with people we knew. We weren't connected with people we had a relationship with. And it began to show me that what's really important in terms of how we gather, how we treat each other, and how we're growing together. So that's Ministry Reimagined. That will be an ongoing dialogue. Then I set the stage by saying, one of the things that we were learning and kind of discovering with our consultant and through the mission advancement process was that the church is kind of a little bit at a crossroads. We have been doing things a certain way for a certain amount of time and getting a certain level of results. And we have to ask ourselves the question, are we really accomplishing the Great Commission that Jesus has given us to do? Are we really doing that to the best of our ability? And so what's going to happen? What can we do differently in ministry so that we're still faithful? We want to be faithful to the Word of God. We want to have the Holy Spirit be the one who's accomplishing His mission, but through us. Well, what are the obstacles that we put in the way? What do we need to remove? How is it that we're maybe rowing in opposite directions against each other even, and not working together toward the mission? And I said how these meetings are really different because this isn't we're not getting together for a church meeting. We weren't going to be making necessarily decisions. And it wasn't a class. I wasn't just going to give them a bunch of blanks to fill in and so that they could go home with a folder full of information, but not necessarily transfer it into practice. This was a workshop where we're coming together and we're growing together. I took us all the way back to the mission advancement team, and the work that we had done, spending months together, seeking, praying, studying, discussing with each other. And really we were trying to answer the question, who are we at Redeemer? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And then eventually get to the how exactly. Of course, we always want to start at the how, but we really have to start at the why and the who and the what. So I unpacked that statement for us as, that you've been hearing more and more of and really needs to become commonplace in our language, is that we're relational Christians obeying Christ's command to make disciples by creating intentional steps so that everyone can grow spiritually. And I said this becomes for us the compass. We have to align our ministry around this statement. Everybody has, all Christians, we have been given the mission from Jesus to go and make disciples, baptizing them and teaching them. We know this. But what does it look like in our congregation? And so we have that statement because, and I caused us to, think about maybe a boat on a lake or a ship on a very big lake. It's trying to get to the other side. If it's even 1 degree off, it's going to end up miles and miles away from where it set out on its initial course if it's just a little bit off. So we want to use that statement as a compass to keep us aligned. And then I said, we really need to do more than just say, hey, what we're all about is making disciples. It's kind of like that coach that gathers the team together in the locker room, and he's got the whiteboard, and he writes in really big letters, what are we going to do? We're going to win, W-I-N. And he said, we're going to win, and everybody's high-fiving each other, and they get to the next practice, and he's like, what are we doing? We're winning. And then over and over, we win, we want to win, let's win. They get out on the field, do they have a clue what plays to put into practice and how to do offense and defense? And I think you'll know what'll happen. You'll have no idea. So often in churches, we do that. We say that we want to accomplish the Great Commission. We want to make disciples. Let's go out and make disciples. But we really have no idea what that looks like, if we're accomplishing it, and how do we do it. That's what we're here about. We're trying to unpack that and get a better understanding of what it means to make disciples. To do that, we have to answer those who, why, and what questions first before we get to the how. Another thing that we talked about is after we got on that level playing field of that clarity statement, we started to take it to the next level, and we moved from our mission advancement team to our mission implementation team. And we said, what are the first two things we need to work on? There's a lot that we need to do, a lot we need to grow in, but what are the first two things? And we realized that as a congregation, we can't give away what we don't possess. We need to become the church that we want to invite people to. And we do that by working on our worship service first. That's Sunday morning, not just the service, but the whole experience. That's why we call it the worship experience. Everything that a person experiences from the time they pull up onto the property to the time they get in their car to go home. And it includes a multitude of things. The whole environment has to come together to be appealing, engaging, and helpful. And so the second thing that we talked about is this, what we're calling the leadership development pipeline. It's really more about a leadership development process because it's so important for us. If you look around, we have a little bit of a vacuum of leadership. We have kind of a missing middle. We have a council, we have elders, and we maybe have some people that are volunteering in ministry, but do we have enough leaders in the middle? And so how do we grow those leaders? How do we recruit, equip, and encourage them? This is what we're calling the pipeline, and you're part of it with the pipeline workshop. And so then I shared with folks how I had gone to 10 different churches this summer with my family, and we really got to experience there were a few things that hit me. One is I thought they were all great churches. I thought they were all faithful to the Word of God. I thought they were all sincere. However, there really was a difference in what maybe you could call the vibe in the churches that we went to. And I think that people really decide the church that they're going to join based on the vibe that the congregation has. They can tell in a few minutes whether the church is alive and authentic and living out what is being preached from the pulpit. They capture it. It's almost like a sixth sense. And people are asking the question, is this a place where I'm going to be able to connect with God, connect with His Word, His family, and I'm going to be able to grow to discover my calling? They size that up pretty quickly. And I shared that I think we can get complacent. We sort of feel like, well, we came in and we chalked off the list. We did the things that, we set out to do, and whatever happens, happens. And there's a kind of a complacency. And so I shared a graphic that I had gotten from a book called Designed to Lead by Eric Geiger and Kevin Peck. And at the center of that, see, we always want to start on the outskirts and say that we want to find the constructs. What do we got to do in ministry so these things happen? But really before that is a layer of culture. That is, what really is the driving force of the congregation, and how have they come together around shared values and shared vision? But even before that is conviction. I took us back to the Old Testament, and I said, you can really see this in the Bible with Joshua and Moses. That group of people had a conviction. They had just seen God do the amazing miracle of bringing them through the Red Sea, leaving Pharaoh and his army behind, getting all of their gold, and now they're going through the wilderness, and God leads them to the promised land. And what happened was, because I gotta skip ahead a little bit, is Moses, all along the way, you see that he's been kind of bringing Joshua along. When they're crossing the Red Sea, Moses is there. When Joshua's there with Moses. When Joshua's receiving the 10 Commandments. Sorry. When Moses is receiving the 10 Commandments, Joshua's there. When Moses is at the tent of meeting, Joshua's there. When it comes time to go into the promised land, Joshua's there. But then we see something happen after Moses dies and now Joshua is ready to lead. When it comes time for Joshua to die, there is a different situation, and that the Bible tells us that another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done. Somewhere along the line, complacency grew in. It didn't go from Joshua to the next generation. And that's a real, something that we really have to wrestle with, is that conviction being passed along. What we have seen, what God has done for us, maybe it's not bringing us through the Red Sea, but what has he done for us? Are we sharing that conviction with the next generation? And so then we took some time and we said, where did you get that conviction? Who shared that with you? And so after we looked at who it was that shared the conviction and the faith that we have, that we each possess, we found that there were people along the way that had certain characteristics. And the real question for us is, can we be those people? If we're going to change to be a church where people encounter God and that conviction is passed on to the next generation. Of course, everybody wants to see that, but are we willing to have that be done with us? There's a cartoon that I shared that said, okay, who wants change? And all the hands go up. Who wants to change? And then you don't see as many hands. Then who wants to lead change? And there's kind of, the room empties out. The thing for us is that the Lord is not willing. Jesus says, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. We don't really have a choice. Jesus has commanded us to go and make disciples. The Father is not willing that these ones would perish without knowing him. And so we get back on track and say we have to find ways to share that conviction with the next generation. And so I asked us to get around our tables in groups and ask the question, what are our barriers to growth? Why is it as a congregation we're not coming into contact with more people? What's creating a little bit of, if you will, an empty space in terms of who we have to share with? What are our barriers to growth? And then what are our barriers to leadership? If we're going to be a church where we're not just talking about how beautiful our sanctuary is, but people are having changed lives, then how are we going to get about it? We're going to have to overcome some barriers. And so we discussed some of the challenges to leadership. And I said, if I had time to summarize all of the little pieces of paper that we shared around the room, of course, all of that raw information is captured for you in a link. You can see what the teams put on their sheets, and we shared in the group. I said that they're probably going to fall into categories that look like this. People aren't getting into positions of leadership, and they maybe aren't even coming to our church because they don't know how, they don't have time, they don't have a framework, and they don't have the resources. And so I just dipped our toes into the subject of saying there is a way out of that. There is a framework as we understand people, not different levels, and it's not like we're put the sausage in one side, the raw materials, and it comes out the other side all ready to eat. It's not like you get into one side of the pipeline and then you come out. It's more like a highway where you can get on and off at different stations. Where are we in those stations? And what do we need? And what we found is that there is a tool out there called Ministry Grid that you'll be hearing more and more about, but it allows us as senior leadership, if you will, or the leaders of leaders in the church to say, where do people fit in and what kind of sort of on-time training do they need for their tasks? What are the core foundational skills that they need. Everybody should know these in any area of ministry, but specifically for your area of ministry and what you're doing, and whether you're a volunteer or a leader or a coach or a ministry director or even a senior leader. What then are some specific skills for the mantle of responsibility that you bear? So I'm not going to get into that. I actually didn't at the meeting. I just put it out there because, well, it's going to be what we're going to be talking about in upcoming pipeline workshops. So this was just a very quick and dirty summary. In case you missed it, I don't want you to feel like you didn't have any idea what happened. Come to the next pipeline workshop. We will be going back over and hitting some of these topics as we get together a shared vision for ministry and a shared language that we have that begins to shape the culture around which we create a worship experience for people that come into our church, and we develop leaders at our church. So I look forward to seeing you at the next pipeline workshop. God bless.